Out what's happening in the world of the Iowa Almanac. So we're going to check in with our Professor Jeff Stein, who says, let's toast to having a drink this morning. Right, Professor?
You guys are talking about getting wet. Well, this topic has to do with being wet.
Well, that's a good way of putting it, yeah.
Wetting your whistle.
That is it, and that was the terminology at the time during Prohibition. Were you a wet state or a dry state? Now, we have talked in this segment, guys, about the fact that Iowa has really been on the cutting edge of a lot of things that we don't get credit for. That was the case with this. Ever since we became a state in 1846, Iowa, frankly, has had a rather uneasy relationship as a state or a territory with alcohol. Production and sale were always limited by state lawmakers, and the state of Iowa actually imposed statewide prohibition in 1916, 4 years before it became national policy. Look at us getting out ahead of the curve. Now, as people who know anything about national prohibition can tell you, that experiment led to bootlegging, including in our state of Iowa. After all, we had easy access to a key ingredient for the manufacture of alcohol, namely a ready supply of corn. Many Iowa bootleggers set up their businesses in rural areas, not only because it was close to the supply of corn, but it was further away from the prying eyes of law enforcement. Iowa bootleggers made moonshine whiskey, wine, gin, and homebrew beer, all of it just simply raw alcohol. More refined illegal liquor, though, could be purchased in what were known as speakeasies in Iowa and across the country. In northwest Iowa, near the small town of Templeton, illegal whiskey made there became popular in speakeasies from Chicago to Kansas City to New York. And now that same Templeton rye is produced quite legally and quite successfully. The illegal production of alcohol led to 20,000 people going to jail across the country in the last half of 1931 alone. But then cooler heads, as it were, prevailed, and on June 20th, this date in 1933, I think that's 85 years ago today, Iowans voted to pass the 21st Amendment, repealing Prohibition. The experiment was officially over later that year when enough other states followed Iowa's lead, of course. But for more than 50 years after Prohibition was lifted, Iowa still strictly controlled the distribution of alcohol, selling it only through the state-run liquor stores until 1987. Hard for today's generation to believe you could not go to a convenience store or a grocery store. You had to go to a state liquor store. And I can tell you from my experience in college, we had the hours of operation memorized because they were not as convenient as is the case today.
Yeah, those are the stores that had the blue signs.
That's it.
Okay, not that we know that for a fact or anything, yeah.
Well, from history.
Yeah, from history. Yeah.
And there are still some of them around. That's how you can tell a state liquor store wound up becoming the location of a private store. They still have the blue sign that says liquor store.
Wow.
Well, after we banned alcohol statewide well before national prohibition, Iowa became one of the very first states to then turn around and vote wet on this date in 1933, with the visions of blue state liquor store signs in our heads.
I can't get over how many people were put in jail. We said 20,000 in the last half of 1931?
Alone in the country. That's
in the country,
right. If you break that down over the 48 states at the time, that's a lot of people sitting in jail just for making moonshine.
Wow.
Hard to believe. Yeah. Thankfully, times have changed here just a little bit. But if people want to go back and peek at some of those stats and some of the data you just revealed to us, what is the simplest way to do so?
You can go to iowaalmanac.com. This story, all the other ones from past days are there, iowaalmanac.com. And you know, there are a lot of people, you may do this, I don't know, brew beer at home now as a hobby. It's a big thing. Well, that 85 years ago could have gotten you locked up.
Wow, that's hard to believe.
Unbelievable. But thankfully, we also have wonderful companies like Templeton Rye that still exist and are trying to go back to their roots of how they created that product many, many years ago.
They weathered the storm.
Right.
Yeah, that's perfect. Well, thank you, sir. It's something to raise a glass to a little later on today.
Absolutely. And alert security. I'll see you in studio tomorrow.
That's a plan. All right, buddy. We'll see you then. It is